I think the fan base has very high expectations. I think those expectations rose in 2023 when all of these stars came to town and all of these MVPs and players with championship experience. 2023 was sort of that turning point for the fan base. But I mean, if you want to talk about the temperature of the fan base, you just have to go to Barclays Center. We're on like a Tuesday night, not on a weekend or a Sunday afternoon. Like on a Tuesday night, the building is still averaging around 15,000 people, which is pretty impressive.
Let's hop into it. A lot of storylines this season, particularly with the New York Liberty. As for myself, they're one of my favorite teams to watch within the W. And have to say, I'm surprised by their performance, not necessarily by the roster, but by the kind of the stereotypical means of a team that wins the championship. There's a little bit of a hangover, but that does not exist with this team. They have been massively aggressive in terms of stamping their dominance within this league. What are kind of your expectations heading into this season, and then your thoughts currently as the Liberties sit atop the entire WNBA at this point of the season?
I mean, I could go into discussing how they've fallen a little bit from grace, like not completely because they've lost 3 games in the past 4, but I'll stick to your question because they still are 10-3. So that still is a very good record. I think the thing about the New York Liberty and what they sort of want to do and what they've set out to do is they don't want to be a one-hit wonder. They really, and this is coming from the top down, this is coming from ownership. They want to become an iconic franchise. They want to become a dynasty. And the way that you accomplish becoming an iconic franchise is by becoming a dynasty. And how you become a dynasty is you win. And you win a lot of titles and you win at a very high level. And so, there was a lot of drama about how Game 5 went down of the 2024 WNBA Finals. You had Lynx head coach Cheryl Reeve saying that the championship was stolen from her team because of certain foul calls. And so I think the Liberty sort of took that personally and want to prove that no, we are a very good team and we did not just win on good fortune or win on luck. And no, the commissioner did not rig the WNBA finals, whatever conspiracy theories there are. So I think that's where it comes from. I also think there are some new pieces and there are players that are really hungry to win again. Natasha Cloud is one of those players who really hadn't been in a winning championship culture or on a team of this caliber since she won the WNBA title in 2019. And then you have someone like Maureen Johannes, who has been on the Liberty on and off. And the last time she was with the franchise was when they lost in heartbreaking fashion in 4 games to the Las Vegas Aces in the 2023 WNBA Finals. So I think all of those ideas coming together is why they have really come right out of the gate. Although, as I said previously, they have dropped 3 of their last 4. And there are specific reasons for that, which we could get into later in the show.
Let's hop into Natasha Cloud because I remember the season opener and immediately her impact was felt, and I feel like she's integrated pretty seamlessly. Can you talk about just her acclimation to this team? A team that's already won the title. She brings in all of her experience, all of her grittiness, her toughness, and just experience to an already loaded team. What has she meant to the Liberty this season so far?
I think what Natasha Cloud has meant is she really brings it on defense. She really, when she is locked in and on, you can put her on the opponent's best perimeter player, and she is just going to make them incredibly uncomfortable. And the thing also about her is she's when players look to screen defenders, Cloud can move through screens pretty quickly because she's a bit she's very when you look at Natasha Cloud, she's very muscular, but she's a little bit smaller than, let's say, Benijah Hamilton, who is 6 foot and is just all muscle. And often you have players putting someone like Benijah Hamilton into a screen, and, it's hard for her to sort of move over it. Natasha Cloud she's a lot quicker on those screens. So I think defensively, we've seen the impact. Offensively, I think it's about her being a facilitator and really making sure that Sabrina Ionescu can get off the ball and that she can find her shot off the ball. Sabrina Ionescu is a combo guard through and through, and so the Liberty like to have a more of a point guard next to her so that, when Ionescu comes off the ball, there's someone who is a very competent facilitator, able to orchestrate the offense. But as I was saying before, the Liberty have had their struggles in the past 4 games, and Natasha Cloud has as well. She has been less aggressive. She has been less focused. Part of it has been that she hasn't been making her shots. Sometimes she takes inefficient shots. Other times she's just not getting downhill and she hasn't been aggressive. So yes, to start the season, she was quite a help to the Liberty, and she also won Eastern Conference Player of the Week because you saw early defenses were really all over the Liberty's big three, and when defenses are all over Sabrina Ionescu, Jonquel Jones, and Breanna Stewart, that gives Natasha Cloud sort of the green light. She has space, she can go and create some offense. But since that Player of the Week honor, things have changed. And, yes, initially it looked very seamless because she actually came to training camp a month early to learn sort of what New York's facilities look like, how they do things, what scheduling and lift schedules look like. And she did her work early. She wanted to be prepared for training camp. But, in the ebbs and the flows of a season, she struggled a little bit, and they're going to need her to be more aggressive moving forward.
Well, let's talk about their trials and tribulations so far. A lot of things that they're dealing with. Jonquel Jones re-sprained her ankle. You have Eurobasket going on, and not to mention just a tough just overall schedule of the W. You have the teams are just loaded, so every night's always a tough matchup for them. What do you think it's going to take for them to kind of rein it in and have momentum heading into the All-Star break? How important is that to kind of get back on the winning track heading into the second half of the season?
Yeah, it's very important. I mean, they're going to be without Jonquel Jones until at least after the All-Star break. Essentially, she re-sprained this ankle, and the team does not want to take any chances. What I can say is that Jones has arrived in San Francisco. She will be traveling with the team, which is a good sign. And what that tells people is that it's not so serious that she's immobile. I think the Liberty do not want this ankle sprain to turn into something worse. They don't want it because oftentimes minor ankle sprains, people who get minor ankle sprains are very susceptible to them getting worse. And a lot of the times what happens is your ankle starts feeling better and it's not necessarily healed. So then you go and you play and then something happens and you're back to square one. So I think the Liberty's approach is the long game with Jonquel Jones, and, they're going to have to adapt to that. Obviously, without Jonquel, you miss a lot of rim protection, you miss a lot of scoring, you miss a lot of rebounding. And so some of their big wings and their backup center, Niara Sabally, those folks are going to get a lot of run, and they have already. Obviously, when Leonie Febish comes back, which the The absolute latest they could get her back is on July 3rd against the Sparks. So that's, maybe in another 10 days they'll get Phoebish back. And that will be a huge help to the team. Because what Phoebish brings is, sure, she brings shooting, she brings excellent perimeter defense, very competent switchability. Since she's 6'4", she can also switch onto some power forwards and small forwards, in addition to guarding guards. And also something very underrated about Phoebish is her passing and just her awareness of what's going on the floor, her basketball IQ. I know that's a word that is often said quite a bit. I guess I'll say her basketball instincts. She's very instinctual. She often is a player who she's making the extra pass. It might not be the assist, but she's making a decision to move the ball that will get the team the best shot possible. And so when you don't have your connector, things are going to look a little bit wonkier. And so things will get better when Phoebish returns, but in the interim, and also, on Sunday, Sabrina Ionescu missed a game with some neck stiffness. We don't know if this will be a lingering injury or if it is just a one-game time thing, but that not having Sabrina Ionescu on the floor absolutely contributed to the team's latest loss in Seattle. But I think what it's going to come down to is it's going to come down to impactful minutes from Niara Sabally at the 5 spot. It's going to come down to Kennedy Burke continuing to just come on the floor and make impact plays. And also Maureen Johannes. It's going to take Maureen Johannes continuing to get comfortable and aggressive and confident in her shot. And so while this is a period of adversity for the team, being without a bunch of their starters, it's an experience that's going to teach them how to win in more adverse and difficult types of situations. You don't know what's going to happen during the postseason. And so them being able to experiment with their bench now is something that's going to help move them forward. The goal for this team is to make a long and deep playoff run. Sometimes when your eye is on the long game, sometimes you lose some games because you want to pace yourself.
You mentioned Jonquel Jones and just her ankle and just pushing it. And what comes immediately to mind was happened in the NBA Finals with Tyrese Halliburton, a different injury, but there's always that risk with the calf. He ends up tearing his Achilles. Is that a concern when we head into the playoffs? At Liberty guaranteed, I think, not to sound arrogant, but I think they're going to have a deep playoff run. Is there going to come a time where her ankles, if it's bothering her, what happens in that situation? If it's re-aggravated, if she wants to play, what do you do? Do you let her play, or do you sit her and kind of not risk a further injury? What happens in that instance? What's your philosophy on that?
Well, I think the idea of having her be out at least a month, and between a month and 6 weeks, they're trying to avoid that situation from happening, right? They're trying to allow her ankle to heal up with a little bit less pressure to come back. It's sort of like the doctor said, okay, you're going to take this amount of time, including rehabbing, letting this thing heal, in addition to starting some conditioning prior to coming back. I think what they're doing now is preparing for a situation, or looking toward the future, so that there is not a situation like what Tyrese Halliburton got himself into. And also I think what it comes down to is when Jonquel Jones returns, it's about not overplaying her either. If they're up 20 points in the third quarter, she does not have to play for the rest of that third quarter. I think it's about the coaching staff getting really smart about rotations, which Sandy Brondello has gotten a ton better at. In 2023, when this team sort of had its first year together, Brondello had the starters out for so many minutes. And what ended up happening was they just did not have enough gas when it came to the playoffs to make it all the way through and win the finals in 2023. So we've seen the benches on these Liberty teams develop. The bench wasn't often used in 2023. It was used a little bit more in 2024, in 2025, especially with some of this early adversity and some absences from the starting rotation. They're looking to build on their bench as well.
One more question about the Liberty. I'm always interested. I ask a lot of journalists about this, and that is that the fan base. What is the temperature of the fans in New York right now, especially with the Knicks, that's the way that ended up? Now you have the Liberty a dominant, they're just saying they're growing, but the goal is for them to build a dynasty. What is kind of the temperature with the Liberty in terms of the fan base so far? Do you have higher expectations? Or are their patients a little bit worn in terms of losses? Kind of what's the temperature of the fan base these days?
I think the fan base has very high expectations. I think those expectations rose in 2023 when all of these stars came to town and all of these MVPs and players of the championship experience. 2023 was sort of that turning point for the fan base. But I mean, if you want to talk about the temperature of the fan base, you just have to go to Barclays Center. We're on like a Tuesday night, not on a weekend or a Sunday afternoon. Like on a Tuesday night, the building is still averaging around 15,000 people, which is pretty impressive. Sure, I believe if I look at across the timeline, they do not lead the league in attendance, but they are right there at number 3, right underneath the Indiana Fever. And they're neck and neck with the Fever when it comes to average attendance. So the Fever's average attendance is 16,657. New York's is 16,013 people. And, the tippity top when it comes to average attendance is the Golden State Valkyries. They average over 18,000 people each home game they host. And, there are many reasons for that. This is a new team. It is a novelty for this community. Also, Golden State has been waiting for years to have a WNBA team. That has been a basketball market that has been starved for a women's professional team. But I guess the point I'm making is that fans are showing up. Fans are showing up. Fans are really excited about this team in New York. They want more. Moving around the concourse and Barclays Center, it is very tough to move around because there are just so many people all the time. But I think that's how I would chalk it up. I think online there is some concern from fans, especially with the team being without Leonie Fibish and Jonquel Jones right now. So there's definitely some concern when they see sort of these losses that are starting to pile up. But I think it's worth remembering that the Liberty's opening schedule was very, very easy relative to the rest of the league. They played the Chicago Sky quite a bit, the Washington Mystics, the Connecticut Sun, and the Golden State Valkyries. Those are all teams within the bottom 7 when it comes to net rating and defensive rating. So, their losses come to the Indiana Fever, the Seattle Storm, and the Phoenix Mercury. These are all teams that play pretty good defense, all within the top 6, and their net ratings are all they're all in the positive and in the top 6 of the league as well.
I want to hop into the rest of the W. Just kind of a general question. What's catching your eye this season? Has there been any surprises? I know for myself, as you mentioned, the Valkyries, that's been a surprise. They're typically expansion teams. They struggled their first year, but they've been pretty solid at competing with some of the top teams. So do you have any other impressions of the W? Anything that shocked you, surprised you, or has pretty much everything met your expectations so far?
So I have to say that not many predicted the Valkyries would be in the position that they are, but if you look on a previous episode of Locked On Women's Basketball from maybe December of 2024, I predicted with my good friend and colleague Alex Simon that the Valkyries would be in a position to get one of the lower playoff seeds, the 7 or 8 seed. I feel pretty confident about that prediction. And the reason I did was because the Golden State franchise has very high professional standard resources. And they have an excellent coach in Natalie Nakase. And then you pair that with a bunch of really good role players that are either in their prime or a little bit younger. And so when you have a really good coach that gets buy-in to a group of players that are hungry and that are pretty talented, because essentially the Valkyries are a bunch of 6 women, because you think about the expansion draft and, essentially they got the first good player off most teams' bench. And so, it hasn't been a surprise, but it's been more of a validation of what I thought they could be, which is, it's really cool to see. I mean, the Valkyries are such a fun team to watch. I mean, I had covered Kayla Thornton here in New York for 2 years, and to see her shining over there and winning a Player of the Week award, I mean, it's quite something for a player who was undrafted and who was really undercovered and almost buried playing in Dallas for all of those years before she came to New York. I mean, when she was playing in New York, the fans could really see the type of player she was. While in Dallas, at the time, there weren't many fans to really see who she was and see her personality. The internet knows her as the number one fan of Papa John's Pizza. You didn't see that and learn that about her until she joined New York. But anyway, when it comes to surprises, I think something that's really interesting is just seeing how many different WNBA teams are leaning into their versatility a little bit more. You're seeing a lot of, I guess, wings and forwards facilitating. You see, everyone from someone like Satu Sabally, Brianna Stewart, Gabby Williams functioning as a main facilitator, point forward type player. I mean, I think I just sort of see teams trying to use versatility to their advantage and create a lot of advantages. I know there's this discussion of positionless basketball, but I don't really know if that's the proper term. I think it's more you have teams that are using their versatility to continue to exploit different matchups and create different advantages. And you want your scoring guards or shooting guards getting down the floor quickly so they can get open, which is part of the strategy of why you have a forward, queuing up the offense. So that's something I've noticed. Teams are leaning into versatility and more spaced out spacing than they were even in 2024.
Shifting gears, last topic. I kind of want to get your opinion on this. It was recently, I think, of the recording of this podcast a couple of days ago. A couple of players, they were discussing the CBA negotiations, the Players Union, the WNBA. They're set to speak on All-Star Weekend of the W. Just kind of your overall thoughts. It seems like it's very positive in terms of the discussions between the two sides and what they both want. Are you optimistic that they'll come to an agreement and will avoid a lockout? Or do you think that's a realistic possibility for this league is a lockout?
It's interesting you asked that because I actually read some reporting that my friend and colleague, Maddie Kenny of the New York Post, wrote recently about a discussion she had with Nneka Ogwumike last night, and Nneka is the president of the Players Association. And so, she told Maddie Kenny that there has been significant progress made and actually that the Players Union, They heard back from the league 5 days ago. They got some responses to some proposals they had sent over. I know around a month ago there was a lot of talk, and even actually at the WNBA draft. So a couple of months ago, there were reports about how the players' union was not hearing back from the league and the league office about certain proposals. But it seems like the discussions are now happening and there is engagement on both sides, which is a positive thing. And so, you know, Agumake seems confident that they're going to meet this deadline and that they won't go into a lockout. Just to provide some historical context, in the previous CBA negotiation for the 2020 CBA, originally the Players Association and the league were supposed to have this all done by the end of October as well, but both sides agreed to push that until before free agency began, which was in early February. So the CBA was officially ratified in January of 2020. But I think what's different this time is, for starters, free agency is going to be the wild, wild west. There are not many players that are signed on contracts for 2026. But also, the thing is, there's going to be a double expansion draft, and it's going to be difficult, or I guess it also depends on what the league decides when it comes to this double expansion draft. Do they decide, okay, we're going to do this right before free agency, or I mean, it's really hard to know. It's hard to know because you don't have a lot of players signed and because you have two new teams, not just one. So the conventional wisdom says you agree to this deal before November hits, and then in November or December, you do this two-team expansion draft. The rules will be different because you have less folks that are signed on contracts. And then once you have the CBA done and you have the expansion draft done, then free agency comes. But there is a lot of unknown at this point. We do know via Maddie Kenny's reporting that the two sides are going to meet during All-Star Weekend, and they're hoping to have a productive meeting during that time.
And I want to get your sense of the players. Are they nervous about this? Or are they completely focused on the season? Kind of, what is the vibe? Are they not really worrying about this? Is kind of like, we'll worry about this later till the season's over, or is this a point of a topic of conversation around the league during the season?
I mean, I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's, you're seeing the Players Association put out these social media graphics that are stating their position on certain issues. Obviously, the first one is the revenue sharing issue. So in the NBA, for your listeners that do or do not know, in the NBA, players get 50% of the revenue that the league makes. In the WNBA, that is not the case. And so players would like that. The COVID-19 pandemic prevented that statute from being triggered in the previous CBA. Essentially, it was the league can get to 50% revenue sharing if the league reaches certain checkpoints. And because of the COVID pandemic, the league did not reach certain checkpoints, and so the players have not been shared on 50% of the revenue. So we're starting to see that pop on social media. Players are starting to read prepared statements to media members. So this is clearly on the minds of the players. I know from being here in New York, Breanna Stewart is on at least a call or two per week because she is a vice president within the executive committee. So players are thinking about this. They have to compartmentalize quite a bit between CBA negotiations, playing their games, whatever is going on off the court for them in their personal lives. That there is a lot that WNBA players have to manage, especially with what's going on in this country. There are WNBA players who care deeply about it and they want to do something about it. So, the life of a WNBA player is a very stimulated one. I will say that.
No, completely true. Jackie, thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Can you let our audience know where they can find you on social media, where they can find your podcast, any of the upcoming projects you have for 2025 as well?
For sure. So you all can find me at my handle on all social media platforms. So that means X, that means Blue Sky, that means Threads, that means Instagram. So I am at Classic J Pow. So like the word classic, CLASSIC, and then J for Jackie, and then Pow for Powell. So that is my handle. You can find my Liberty coverage at the Next. You can hear my national women's basketball podcast at the Locked On Women's Basketball Podcast, and you can find some WNBA coverage at NBC Sports. I just started working with them and helping them build out their WNBA coverage because they are getting media rights in 2026. So if you are a fantasy team player or a league owner or whatever within the fantasy space, check out NBC Sports' Player News, and then I will have some words and stories under my own byline there as well.
Fantastic. Yeah, this is my first time playing WNBA fantasy. Do not know what I'm doing, so I'll be definitely reading your work to get some tips. And we'll definitely have to have you back on to talk some WNBA fantasy as well. I find that whole world fascinating, so we'll be checking up on that. Jackie, thank you very much for the time. Truly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Justin. It was a pleasure.